India straight to the snowy peaks and mist-covered valleys of the north. Welcome back to the Bhopal Literature Festival presented by the Society for Culture and Environment, powered by Dainik Bhaskar. Our next session is titled Folk Tales from the Himalayas. The Himalayas are not just mountains, they are the keepers of secrets. Every valley has a legend, every stream has a song, and every village has a ghost story or a miracle that has been whispered down through generations. In this session, we are going to explore the oral traditions, the myths, and the scent of the soil that defines the Himalayan experience. To guide us through these peaks, we have an author who is truly gem of the region. Please welcome Ms. Mona Verma ma'am on the stage with a huge round of applause. And to converse with her, we have a scholar and storyteller who breathes life into tradition. Please welcome Professor Vinita Dhondyal Bhatnagar ma'am on the stage with a huge round of applause. I take the honor to introduce our distinguished guests for the day. Mona ma'am is an award-winning author of 11 books and numerous anthologies. An alumna of Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi University, she also holds a postgraduate certificate from Harvard Business School. Her connection to the mountains is recognized at the highest level. She has been honored with the Uttarakhand Ratan and the REX Karamveer Gold Medal. She currently serves as the chairperson of the Literature Committee FICCI FLO Uttarakhand. Her latest book, The Scent of the Himalayas, has been longlisted for the WVOW Awards 2025. A true voice of the hills, let's give her a warm round of applause. And our moderator, Vinita ma'am, is also an alumna of Lady Shri Ram College and St. Stephen's College. She has an illustrious career spanning over 3 decades in academia and creative writing, including a stint as a visiting professor at York University. But her heart beats for stories, and as a storyteller, she has performed at the Federation of Asian Storytellers, FEAST, and has deeply explored the folk traditions of her native Gherwal. She is currently engaged in telling the story of Jaydev's Gita Govinda, blending the classical with the folk. 2 LSR alumni, 2 daughters of the mountains, and a treasure trove of stories. Mona ma'am and Vinita ma'am, the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to Bhopal Literature, Art and Festival. And we're talking about the Himalayas. And let me make an honest confession. I am Dhondyal Bhatnagar, so I'm very proud of my Garhwali roots and very happy to be in this session. I'm going to jump right in because we want a lot of questions from the audience, a lot of interaction. I want to ask you, Mona, why should people... It's a collection of tales and stories from the Himalayas. Why should people in Bhopal read?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to Bhopal Literature Festival and the entire team for having me here. It is an honor and a privilege that I'm sharing this dais with Vinita. Coming back to your question, Vinita, why should people read this book? See, the folk tales, the legends, or the traditions that we have, they actually become the social backcloth of a society that we live in. So why I call it the social backcloth of a society is because whatever that we read, whatever that we know, whatever that we absorb from outside turns into the way we, turns into our behavior in the long run, turns into our belief in the long run. And that is why it is important for people to know why certain stories are told, especially from regions where the stories have almost evaporated. So I come from Haridwar, and over the years, over many decades, I saw many people migrating from the hills to the plains and the plateaus. Now what happens with the first generation that migrates to another place? They carry with them their food habits, their traditions, their beliefs. But when it comes to the generation next, and everybody is so busy eking out a livelihood for themselves that they do not bother much about what their parents carried with them or what their parents believed in or had abject faith in. So they don't give a damn about it because there's so much in life happening for them. And then comes the next generation who do not even bother to water their roots. So who's going to tell the stories from the Himalayas, stories from the deserts, or these stories, I would say actually they are backcloth of and the backstories of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And that is why these stories need to be told, because in case you want to understand the epics, you have to understand that, for example, the battle of Mahabharata was not just the battle of Pandavas and Kauravas. It was actually the battle of the beliefs, the battle of the yeses and the nos and the maybes that people harbored within themselves, right? They were actually the battle of the backstories that people had. So these backstories are the ones that need to be told for the children of today to understand why certain thing happened. So if I tell you about Shikhandi, right, or Shikhandini for that matter, and why Bhishma Pitama could actually not raise a weapon against him or her, there is a backstory, and that backstory may not be there in the Mahabharata, but you have to understand where do the Panch Kedars come from, why the Pandav Nritya is there in the hills, or why do we have the Mukhota dance in the hills. These things need to be understood. They were not just recreational practices. They have a profound meaning, and the meaning that actually governed the way people acted, people did certain things, people followed certain practices. So these stories need to be told, because the loyal fan base for these stories is no more.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, absolutely, I agree with you. These stories are actually the cultural, intangible heritage, and they need to be preserved. And since I belong to this region, I'm extremely grateful to you for doing this.
Thank you.
But there are a lot of people here who will not share my loyalty to Garhwal, and they come from different areas, different villages, different towns, with different stories. How can they do this, recreate this for their own heritage? So what was your process of collecting these stories?
I think my process in itself was pretty much like a three-dimensional process. For example, the first, I mean, how do you get a story? Now, there are millions of stories, but how do you get the stories which are befitting for this book? So this book now has 20 stories. How do I identify which story would work well for the book? So it is a 3-day process. So my first process is not an academic one. So first of all, I hear the story from an unreliable source. This person could be a migrant, this person could be a house help, or this person could be just anybody who knows the story rather randomly. So this is an unreliable source. Then my second step is the academic and the reliable source. What is written about the story? Where is the story coming from? Now there could be various dichotomies. There could be various gaps between the two. The third one is my mental research. So now I try to find out what was the practical, what was the psychological, what was the social, and what was the religious significance of this story. So when all these factors are taken in and they are amalgamated together, that is when you are able to tell the right story, to which you may add your logic, you may add history to it, but you can't just stretch the truth. So the story that you have heard from both the reliable as well as the unreliable source, without any such academic research per se, is actually the true story. A story which has a tradition, and the story which also has a physical evidence in terms of a monument or a building. For example, you have a Shuktal, or you have a Ram Setu, or you have the Somnath temple today. So these are the stories where not much research is required, because there is a physical evidence that is explaining them. But a lot goes in from the writer's part, where we start doing the research regarding stories where these kind of evidences don't exist. But yes, I have to pass them through my mental frame. And then, of course, there has to be logic. You cannot pass through everything. I mean, you cannot put everything into a book because you have heard it. Where is the logic? Where is the science behind it? And there are very interesting incidents. And secondly, when I want my book to be read by all these young people over here, as well as by people who can still read, even when they are 99, I have to be careful about what I am shelling out there. We are hefting a huge responsibility as writers on our shoulders. So, what is it that I'm telling the people? For example, how many of you know about Goddess Parvati? Everybody knows. Who was a son of Parvati? Wrong answer. Ganesh was not Parvati's son. It was Vinayaka. Vinayaka was Parvati's son and Kartikeya was Parvati's son. When Vinayaka was beheaded, at that particular time, he was given the name Ganesh. It was not his original name. He was given that name. Now, why the head of an elephant? Because an elephant is known for massive knowledge index. Secondly, it was found in the direction of north. That was the first head that was animal that was found in the north direction, and the north direction is supposed to be the direction of permanence and longevity. That is why you have the North Star, the permanent one over there. That is there. So there are reasons behind that. At that time, if I were to ask this very this illustrious young generation, that at that particular time, was Parvati a mother or was Parvati a goddess when she loses her son to Shiva's recklessness? She was a mother. So I, as a writer, I have to tell the story from the point of view of a mother and not a goddess. The moment I start telling the story from the point of view of a goddess, I've lost my audience. She can't be a goddess at that time. Shiva cannot tell her, अब ये तुम्हारा बेटा था, 5 मिनट बाद अब ये तुम्हारा बेटा है, बस आधार कार्ड पर इसका फोटो बदलवा लेना. It is not happening. So I'm telling the story from the point of view of a mother. At that time, when Parvati is livid, she tells Shiva that I want this temple for my son, and this temple for my son is not this elephant boy, it is the temple for the boy who was my son Vinayaka, and that is how you have the Adi Vinayaka temple in Tamil Nadu. The first one that there was. So there is a reason behind all those things, and that is how it actually becomes relevant and logical to the generation that wants to read it.
Okay, thank you very much. And notice now the hall is filled up with young people. So I'm going to show off and tell you that there was Nakkati Rani, and I have actually been researching her but never found information as detailed as in Mona's book. And this was a Rani that nobody knows about outside Garhwal, I think even inside Garhwal. The Muslim invaders, when they would come into Garhwal, everybody had given up their chieftaincy and taken right? And she was one person who said, I will not let it happen. So when the army used to come, she was a great strategist. So she would take the time when it was winter, when the army couldn't move, and they were from the plains. So हम लोग कहते हैं देसी हैं, कुछ नहीं जानते, पहाड़ी हैं हम, हाँ. So वो पहाड़ में जब आते थे देसी, तो उन पे they didn't understand the contours of the land, and so they would be captured, and then she wouldn't kill them, but she would cut off their nose. So that is why she's called Nakkati Rani. And please remember her name. And from Garhwal, Nakkati Rani. And she did it not once but twice, I think, during the time of Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb. Okay. So, and then they said, okay, leave that kingdom alone. वो queen को रहने दो, बाकी जगह जाएंगे. Now, how do we go with this? So I want you to talk a little bit more about her, please, and maybe, yeah.
Thank you for identifying this story, because there's something about this story I want to tell everybody. The first mistake most of the people from Uttarakhand make, they call it Nakkati Rani. It is not Nakkati Rani, it is Nakkati Rani. Because Nakkati is the one who's lost her nose. She didn't lose her nose.
Oh, Nakkati.
She was the one
good,
who was actually slicing off other people's noses. And why it is Nakkati? So that is the first thing. Because Nakkati means that you've done something
and her name is somehow
you have been
Nakkati,
reprimanded.
Yeah.
But no, she was the one who was cutting other
Nakkati.
people's nose, and that is how she averted all the Mughal invasion. And she was a lady who knew nothing about politics. She knew nothing about reigning till
That's
her
right.
husband passed away. And then the Mughals started eyeing the kingdom, which was beset with great richness of resources. So they wanted to invade this particular kingdom, thinking that once they have it on their side, they will be brimming with the riches from that point. But how she averted it? So every time the Mughal army would come towards Uttarakhand, she would have her soldiers, because she didn't have as many soldiers. She had very little army, very scant army. So she knew that a one-on-one warfare was not possible with the Mughals. So she would just station her guerrilla army on either sides of the bridges. So when the Mughal army would try to scale the bridge and go to the other side, there's an army standing on your left and the standing on your right. Now where do you go? And they would just come forward and start slicing their noses and telling them, go back to your ruler and tell them कि हमारा ये हश्र किया है. Now, cutting the nose, she could have slayed them. Those people could have slayed them. They could have killed them. But she didn't do that. So where does this metaphorical act come from? It comes from Ramayana, where Shrupnaka's nose was sliced. She was not killed. She was not humiliated. She was not molested. But her nose was sliced as a symbol of humiliation, as a reprimand. And the same thing she did. She knew that if she starts killing all those soldiers, they might come back more in numbers. Even her people would get killed. And as it did, she didn't have as many. She didn't even have as much ammunition either. So she cut their noses. She told them, either you jump into this river. The river was in spate, and anybody could have drowned, no matter how good a swimmer they were. Either you jump into the river, or we let you cut your noses. Most of the people jumped into the river in the Mughal army and they died. And the ones who did not want to do that, she cut their noses. And after that, it is this particular kingdom which averted every invasion from the Mughals and was one kingdom that was never conquered by them. And that is why Nagkati Rani, her name was Rani Karnavati, and because of her, we have a village called Karanpur, close to Dehradun. That is how the village, the East Canal, the East Road Canal that we have in Dehradun, was the canal that was actually dug up by her. But nobody knows about these things.
Yes, thank you so much. What I didn't know about and learned through your book are two characters, Veer Buddhi and Vani Vilas Dabral. Yeah. So Veer Buddhi seems like a Birbal, Tenali Raman character, and then again Vani Vilas Dabral, heroic figure, but I didn't know about these two. Elaborate upon them or
So there were so many characters in, when in the storytellings or in the folklores of the hills, who come across people who defied every stereotype, every bias that there was. Mostly when you think of people from the hills, especially in my state of Uttarakhand, they say, oh, they are simpletons. Most of them are not educated, and they just take to agriculture or horticulture to eke out a livelihood. It is not that. When you go back to all these stories, you see these people who are defying the every odd to come up in the society and change the way people look at women, the way people would look at people who were ostracized from the society in terms of caste, in terms of color, in terms of creed, in terms of gender. So we have Vani Vilas, who is telling his mother that why can't I eat from them? If they can eat from my plate, why can't I eat from their plate? So all these things are there. So I think the children of today and even older generations who do not follow the folklores from the Garhwals or from the Kumaon range or even Himalayas, because you see that the folklores are right from Jammu and Kashmir to Arunachal Pradesh. So these tales are tales that are defying stereotypes, gender inequality in terms of Rongu and Rangeet, right? So they are there, and they need to be told that even from that time, people were that aware. When we look at our heritage, we feel, oh, it is ancient heritage. What is there for us? लेकिन जो हमारी सभ्यता है वो प्राचीन जरूर है, वो जर्जर नहीं है. It is ancient, but it is not obsolete. You look at the Hanuman Chalisa, it says, Yug Sahastra Yojan par bhanu lilyo tahi madhur fal janu. That the sun is this far from Earth. So one yug is 12,000 years, Jojan is 1,000 years, Yug Sahasra, no, Yug is 12,000 years, Sahasra is 1,000 years, and then the 8,000 years. So now when you make a product, we are very close to the scientific product of the distance between the earth and the sun. It was there. So look at the scientific relevation and the astronomical correctness of the Hanuman Chalisa. You look at the size of the atom, you look at the length of the year. All these things are explained in our epics. But if we tell somebody from Generation Z onwards that why don't you read any of this, there are two things that are happening. They don't want to read it because it is very didactic, and it is not their fault. It is written in a manner that it is didactic. It is not easily understandable. The language is in a way a bit more harsh for their understanding, way too elevated, so they can't get it. It's not legible for them. So I think it is our duty to write it in simpler form, in a relatable form, so that they read it. It's not as if children don't read. When the new latest Harry Potter book is coming out, you go to London and you see there are serpentine queues. Even in the dog days of winter, at 3 a.m. in the morning, people do queue up outside because people do read. But the point is that when it comes to so many of Indian epics and the retellings, we are telling stories in the way we want to tell. Because we want to tell the readers, I know a little more than you, right? But the readers are not willing to read it. So you're missing the mark over here. So you write it in simpler terms, without diluting the message, without diluting the origin of the story, they are willing to read. So I think hats off to this generation. They have a very logical mind. They do read.
Absolutely. In fact, they organized a quiz yesterday, and the answers that were coming in, I don't know how many people were there. I was like, I wouldn't know half the answers myself. So people are reading.
Yes,
they are
yeah.
aware. And of course, I am doing my propaganda. So when she's talking about Nakkatti or Nakkatti, Rani, the women of Garhwal, because of necessity, because the men migrate, the women run the economy and they run the households, and they'll end up paying a lot of and you might have heard about the Chipko movement. Now, I just want to bring you to the other, of course the title is, and I'm going to keep going back to Garhwal, so I'm going to resist that.
Bhemata.
Yeah, and this is, I want you to talk about the other women, which are the stories, the strong women characters in this.
Well, you have the Rongyu from Sikkim, right? You have Bhemata, right? We have all these very strong characters because I think it is the voice of women which is silenced everywhere. We are not talking about the hills. See, even when Shakespeare was writing, there were fewer and fewer dialogues in most of the plays, not every play, most of the play, because people who were acting or enacting those parts were also men half the time. So lesser understanding of a woman sometimes, and lesser understanding of women's characters and their voices. And what was happening everywhere, more so in Asian countries, was that the most educated and the solvent women of the society were also convinced with the way they were living. They were satisfied. They were and rather laid back also about it. So if a woman did raise their voice, they were like, "Tumko kya zarurat hai? Why are you toppling the apple cart for us also?" So it's not happening. So that is why I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag. There are very strong characters, even the characters who are also full of remorse when they do something wrong. Yeah. So I think for a woman to be strong, it is also to sometimes understand that where is it that we end up making the mistakes, and be remorseful also, instead of always going and targeting the other gender. I talk about women who did not minimize themselves. Otherwise, most of the women out here in the world, everywhere, have learned to minimize themselves. They are always like, okay, if you would ask a woman in a small city, "Acha, aap kya karti hain?" "Mera chota sa parlor hai. Mera ek chota sa boutique hai." Why is everything so chota sa for women? You ask a man in my city and he will have मुश्किल से 1 बीघा का प्लॉट, खेत है हमारे. But कौन सा खेत है तुम्हारा? But the way women minimize themselves, that is why when I'm writing these stories, I want to tell every woman, you can also say, खेत हैं हमारे, हम एक बड़ा काम करते हैं. I'm doing the best of my capability and capacity, and I'm doing it. So all those stories are there in this book, and it is for the readers actually to explore. If we tell everything over here, they will not buy the book.
Yes, so I'm going to ask the last question because I want people to ask questions. And she is like a fountain. If you press the right button, you'll get lots of information. I'm just asking the last question. This is your 10th book?
This is my 9th book.
9th book. She has 9 books already out, 10th come now.
10th has just come out.
Yeah, so what's now? What will we see in next PLF?
Uh, from your mouth to God's ears. Yes, the next book is on partition, and it is called The River That Remembers, where the entire setting is around the Chenab River, and I speak about the undocumented human narratives from partition. So I was a product of a household that had traversed that boundary from the Ghakkad Mandi, from the Gujranwala district of Pakistan to India. And I was brought up by my grandparents, and whenever I would ask my grandfather कि कोई कहानी सुनाओ, no matter where the story started, it always went back to his village, the village and the land that he had left behind. And always ended with one शेर that he would say कि जब पत्थर मारने आए तो वो भी साथ आए जिनका गुनाह मैं अपने सर लिया करता था. That means they were my friends, my chachas, the fufas. People, I call them my chacha, mamujan or fufa. So they were the people. So that was the level of, I think, treachery or betrayal on both the sides. Where the Muslims had to tell the same story, the Hindus also had to tell the same story. So I heard the stories from both the sides. From family friends, right from General Shah Nawaz Khan to my grandfather Lajpat Rai Kapoor, who were the best friends, incidentally. And I heard the stories, and then came this particular book. This book is not the era from Warren Hastings to Lord Mountbatten, but it has the undocumented human narratives, the stories of people who traversed the boundaries, people who lost, people who betrayed, people who got betrayed, people who loved, and people who could not be loved, who could never find it in and around Chenab, and how the Chenab reunites them later.
Thank you so much. Just before we throw it open to the audience, I have requested Aziz ji to read from the story. It's a love story from Sikkim, and it's beautiful. So if you need the mic.
The beginning of time saw Mother Earth as a barren wilderness. Can everyone hear me?
I think mic.
Mike will be required.
The beginning of time saw Mother Earth as a barren wilderness. Itmubo, the Mother Creator, felt that life was the greatest gift that could flourish in this space, so she shaped the mountains and created rivers and lakes. She grew trees that became the life force of human civilization to feed from. But the Lepchas believe that the rivers, Rangit and Rongyu, the mother goddess Itmomo created, were the iconic gifts to mankind. Clear, azure, sweet water from the warbling rivers that made the area around them lush and abundant. Together the streams gurgled down the mountain slopes amidst the verdant valleys, as if breaking the trance of the quiet leafy landscape. The Lepchas believed that when the world slipped into a deep slumber, the river spirits would come to life and meet secretly. And it was true. In the quiet of the starry night, two river spirits used to meet above the pristine, snowy Himalayas peaks. They floated in the clouds and playfully chased each one across the other in the inky skies. But love has a scent that wafts around lovers, and no one can miss it. They had overheard the trees and animals sniggering in their togetherness, while Rangit was the exquisite one, with striking features, Rongyu was rather ordinary in her appearance. They had heard murmuring. He will sour over her in at no time, just make a show of affection. Such infatuations are short-lived, just so commonplace. To escape the barbed comments, Rongyu decided to change her course. One day our love will come to light. I do not wish the evil eye to tarnish our relationship. So what can we do to keep it under wraps? Rangit asked. Let us flow our separate ways. No sooner had she uttered these words than Rangit stopped her. What are you saying? How can I even think of parting from you? Oh no, that's not what I'm alluding to. Then, asked a visibly rattled Rangit, we will leave the mountains separately and meet up at the delta, where we will merge and flow into the ocean together, answered.
Thank you, ma'am. You know, we writers write for our readers, but you know how heartwarming it is when a reader reads to the author. Thank you very much. You know, having said that, I've been asked this question many times by by readers. Why? Why certain things? Why should I believe in what you are saying? Especially when it comes to the Mahabharata. And there are many stories which are actually the backstories of Mahabharata in this particular book. It could be the Pandav Nitya, it could be about the Panch Kedars. So these stories are there. And I always give them one explanation. You have to give a logical explanation to this young generation because they think in logical terms, in a very scientific term, and in binaries as well. So give them one logical explanation, and that is, take Parvati to be the human body. Now, how many senses do we have? We have 5 senses. Now, this human body is wedded to its 5 senses. And what are the Kauravas? The Kauravas are the tendencies of the human body. And we all have positive tendencies and we also have negative tendencies. But if the 5 senses feel that they can the 5 senses feel that they can gamble with 100 tendencies, they are going to lose them. So all the tendencies of the mind need to be exterminated. Even the good Kauravas fell prey to Pandavas' warfare. That's the reason. So if you look at the life world that we live in, it is the constant war between your senses and your tendencies. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I fall in love with that one or should I drop him? Isn't it? Should I go in for to be an engineer or should I go in to be a pilot? Kind of. So everything is a constant war between your senses and the tendencies. And the world that we live in is the Kurukshetra. So think about it, readers. Think about what I've just said. And the entire Mahabharata will make sense to you. It will not come across as something which is not logical, which is illogical, or it is very abstract. It isn't. There are things that we don't believe in presently, but they turn out to be, it is almost sacrilegious to say that, well, this is not true. If you look at Malik Muhammad Jaisi's Padmavat, right, he said that is an allegorical tale. It is not real. But it is almost sacrilegious today to say that it is an allegorical tale. People have come to believe it because it has been told so many times. So if you have a good tale to tell, if you have something which defies the traditions, defies the social mores, defies the stereotypes, defies the biases, things that do not work for us, tell those tales again and again and again so that they turn into beliefs. This is how writers shape the society and the society's mindset.
Thank you so much for this wonderful session. Yeah, if anybody has a question, you can raise your hand.
Yes.
Volunteers, please pass the mic. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ronak Kaur. I would like to begin with saying a small shairi, which is my own written shairi. And thank you for a very insightful and beautiful session.
There's not enough time. Can you ask the question?
Hanji, sure. Ma'am, you spoke about we would change the language of the epic because it is not, the language is not easy enough for the youth to go up with that. So can you elaborate a bit on that? Were you saying that about religious epics or the epics of literature?
Thank you for the question, Ronak. Any epic, any story, any writing, any essay, any narrative, any document for that matter. See, what is the purpose why we write something? We write something so that somebody reads it, right? Your ink has to make sense to somebody. Otherwise, even the publisher is not going to publish you. But if the language is such that you are appeasing only yourself, then you fail to convince your reader. अब for my शायरी for you is लफ्ज़ों के भी जायके होते हैं, चखकर परोसना चाहिए. अगर वो मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही तो तुमको क्या समझ आएगी? Simple. So anything, but without diluting the mainstay of that particular story.
Okay, just as we've been stressing out the
I'm sorry, yeah, there were questions from here. Let's give everyone a chance. Yes.
Yeah, the gentleman there.
Ronak, you ask.
आपको मैं बधाई देना चाहूँगा. 9 किताबें आपने लिखी हैं.
Thank you, sir.
मैंने कोई भी नहीं पढ़ी unfortunately.
Thank you.
I'll be motivated to go one of them.
कोई बात नहीं.
मैं भी उत्तराखंड से हूँ
जी.
और आप भी वहाँ की कहानियाँ लिखी हैं. मेरा फीलिंग थी कि अगर ये कहानियाँ हिंदी में होती, क्योंकि सारी हिंदी बेल्ट है, उत्तराखंड, गढ़वाल, सब हिंदी, लार्जली हिंदी, डायलेक्ट इज हिंदी, थोड़ा थोड़ा फर्क है. तो अगर हिंदी में होती शायद ज्यादा इफेक्टिव होती.
सर हिंदी में आ रही हैं, वाणी प्रकाशन को दे दी गई हैं, बिकॉज हमने भी ये ज़रूरत को महसूस किया.
हाँ.
हमको मालूम था कि इसकी जो रीडरशिप है वो बढ़ेगी. बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो उस बेल्ट से आते हैं और वो उनके लिए अंग्रेज़ी मुश्किल है, इतना ग्रास्प नहीं है इस लैंग्वेज पर. लेकिन जो मेरा पब्लिशर था उन्होंने कहा पहले हम किताब अंग्रेज़ी में निकालेंगे, लेकिन अब किताब का 6th एडिशन आ चुका है, ये 6 बार रीप्रिंट में जा चुकी है और 7वीं के लिए वाणी प्रकाशन से मेरी बात हो गई है. ये किताब हिंदी में, बांग्ला में और मेरे ख्याल से गुरमुखी में भी हम निकालेंगे.
बहुत बधाई, बहुत बधाई.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू. आपका बिल्कुल पॉइंट रेलेवेंट है. थैंक यू.
More questions, I saw hands up.
Next question.
There's a girl here, she also raised her hand.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. And then at the back, there's somebody else.
हेलो मैम. सो
Yes.
माय क्वेश्चन इज व्हाट अबाउट दोज जो इन फोक टेल्स को अपने हिसाब से यूज़ करते हैं, अपने हिसाब से उसको मैनिपुलेट करके चेंज करके सबको बताते हैं. जैसे हम लोग जानते हैं, मुझे उसके बारे में जानना भी अगर आप बताओ, दैट सीता की अग्नि परीक्षा, उसको बहुत लोग गलत इंटरप्रेट करके सबको बताते हैं. उसमें ये बताते हैं लाइक वुमेन कैसे सप्रेस करी गई थी, वुमेन को कैसे दबाया गया था. तो मैं बस उसके बारे में जानना चाहती हूँ.
इस बारे में हम लंबी बात बाहर भी कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि देखिए वाल्मीकि रामायण में और तुलसी रामायण में फ़र्क है. बहुत सारी चीज़, कहीं अग्नि परीक्षा नहीं है, कहीं लैंग्वेज अलग है, कहीं बहुत सारे पात्र भी हैं जो उसमें इंट्रोड्यूस हैं लेकिन दूसरे में इंट्रोड्यूस नहीं है. क्योंकि देखिए जब आप देखते हैं कि कब कौन सा साहित्य लिखा गया, when a particular literature is attempted upon, what was the society, what were the religious and the psychological beliefs of people at that particular time. So things change. So stories change when storytellers change. So what people do is they start adding their own objects, their own emotions, their own social beliefs as well as their own dialogues to a story. And the problem is that when it comes to epics are still written, but when it comes to the Vedas and the Puranas, एक श्रुति है, एक स्मृति है, कुछ भी बोल दीजिए. लेकिन अगर आपको उसको अंडरस्टैंड करना है, then you will have to do your own bit of research. So when I was researching, I came across the names of 4 birds: Pingashka, Subodha, Vibodha and Subhatra. Right? Now these birds, Rishi Jaimini went to look for them because he wanted answers from the Mahabharata from these birds. Now, with the word Pingashka, the name of this bird is different everywhere. आपने अष्टदश पुराण पढ़ लिया, आप कांची काल कोठी पीठम चले गए, everywhere the name was different. Now, how do I get the right name? But the story was very interesting and I wanted to include it in my book. Now, what do I do? Then I started, because now everything has lots of iconography. Why somebody is called, has a particular name, goes back to their character. Krishna, the dusky skinned one, Kaliya Nag for that matter, Satyavati there are certain reasons why people were Duryodhan, Dushasan. The names themselves are, they carry the weight of a meaning. Now, what happened is, I said, now, what does the word Pingashka, what does the word Pingashka mean? It means the yellow-eyed one. And who has yellow eyes? Birds. So you have to do your own sort of research at your end also, sometimes to understand the story, and never get the story from what is available on Google or what ChatGPT tells you. Try extracting it from the most original source that is, and the way it is still taught or it is told in the native villages. When you get that organic form, that is the one which is most unadulterated.
Thank you. There's one more question only, please, at the back.
Yeah, last question
And
at the
also
back.
there's a curse. There was a curse on Sita from the parrots. There's a curse of parrots on Sita. It is there in the story is there in my book, the Deva Sutras. So that is what led Sita to lead the life in her, that particular life of desertion in the next life. She was cursed by a pair of parrots. Uska ye hashra hona hi tha. It is there in the Puranas. Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good
Ma'am,
afternoon.
shamanism is an integral part of the Himalayan culture. Ma'am, how the shamanistic culture, shamanistic belief is shaping the Himalayan folk tales? That's the question.
I would just say that, whatever people really believe in, whatever people really practice, they start assuming that this is the right way of doing things. No outsider can go and tell them that, whatever you're believing in is rather didactic or it is very obsolete. Whatever people do and they believe in, that turns into their practice, and in the long run they also start believing that this is the right way of doing things. This is the way things are. So any culture that there is, it will also shape the social and the psychological and I won't say as much as religious, but the social and the psychological understanding of a particular person and a particular community, for that matter. People start believing in things. So if there is a story like Kala Paja from Himachal Pradesh, people still say that when they go into the forest, they smell the smell of khichdi with ghee. It is not there, but they smell it. Why? Because there is a belief system that is ruling your five senses over there. You suddenly start, for that matter. Now in the season of Kafal, they say, those two birds are singing. Yes, did you hear the song? Yeah, it sounds like a very painful song. It's not a painful song. The birds are just chirping. It is very cold. They are chirping, but the Kafal fruit is ripe at that particular moment. And then there's a story how a mother accidentally kills her own child, thinking that she has consumed the harvest. So they believe that the birds are actually in remorse. The birds are actually singing a very sorrowful song. So everything turns into a belief from what you know. Your knowledge leads to that particular belief.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. That was Mona Verma, sent to the Himalayas. And over to you.
Thank you so much. Can we give our speakers a huge round of applause? Truly such a beautiful and a magical session, you really transported us into the tales and into the stories. Ma'am, itna beautifully aap storytelling karte hain, all the details, intricacies, wo humko samjha rahi thi. We felt like, we can see it, visualize it. And bahut beautiful session tha. Mona Verma, ma'am, thank you so much for bringing the fragrance and the stories and sharing them with us and carrying the rhythm of the hills and the wisdom lived, in the landscapes. Your words reminded us that mountains do not shout, they whisper. And only patient listeners can listen to them. And we have a wonderful audience of patient listeners over here with us. Thank you so much. And Vinita, ma'am, of course, such a beautiful, magical, insightful person with so much wisdom and, beautifully moderated, grounded the session. And to honor this beautiful exchange, I would now like to invite Meera Das ma'am, a founding member of the society, to please come up on the dais and present the memento to our wonderful speakers, guests. This is a token of our appreciation, a token of our love. Can we give them a huge round of applause? This memento that you see over here is specifically created for the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival by Padma Shri Durga Bai ji. The artwork reflects a beautiful landscape and it is shown represented beautifully. Thank you so much. And thank you to the wonderful audience. I would request you all to please stay over here as we will continue with more amazing sessions. And if you want to speak with our authors and speakers, you can do so after the session in the authors lounge. Yeah, Kanish ji, please come on the stage and can we give her a huge round of applause?